Pain often feels private, but the damage rarely begins in isolation for us. When distress keeps returning, a purely chemical explanation seems too narrow for our lived experience. Relief is crucial because people organize their entire lives around the hope that someone can finally explain their suffering. When the explanation is incorrect, time passes, side effects accumulate, and the original injuries remain active. One significant mistake is treating despair as a glitch confined within a single mind. That perspective overlooks the impact of work, loneliness, values, trauma, humiliation, insecurity, and the broader world pressing in daily. The turning point comes when pain stops appearing as nonsense and starts appearing as a signal. Signals are uncomfortable, but point toward conditions that need attention rather than mere silencing. You will see how disconnection grows, why it wounds so deeply, and where true reconnection can begin. Lost Connections by Johann becomes far more useful when you subscribe to the channel for grounded ideas that help make sense of pain. For years, depression was portrayed as a shortage of the right brain chemicals. That promise sounded clean, modern, and merciful, as it transformed anguish into a medical repair job. Yet, placebo research consistently showed that much of the improvement came from expectation, attention, and the story wrapped around treatment. When unpublished drug data was examined, the gains from antidepressants appeared modest for the average patient. The deeper issue was not just weak results, but a weak explanation. Lowering serotonin levels did not reliably make people depressed, which punctured the grand certainty around imbalance. Even scientists close to the field admitted that the public story had outrun the evidence. Once that certainty breaks, another pattern becomes easier to notice across many different lives. Depression and anxiety rise more from damaged relationships, deadened days, fear and hopeless surroundings than a single missing substance. Viewing pain this way does not deny biology, but stops pretending that biology alone is the whole map. Work occupies most of our waking hours, so meaningless tasks can poison an entire life without dramatic, visible crises. The damage grows when people have little control, no recognition, and feel their efforts don't matter. Joe, mixing paint all day, felt reduced to repetition, thanked by habit yet never truly seen. Whitehall research found something similar, with lower control at work closely tracking with more depression. Status mattered, but control within the same pay band mattered too, making the finding harder to dismiss. When work is deadening, people arrive home shattered, losing energy for friendship, family, and play. The message received all day is brutal and simple. Your judgment is irrelevant here. That kind of powerlessness does not stay at the office door after closing time. Meaningful work is not a luxury feature. Purpose and agency protect emotional life from collapse. When work keeps flattening the self, despair stops looking mysterious and starts looking like an understandable response. Loneliness hurts because humans were designed to thrive in webs of mutual aid, not in elegant isolation. When connection breaks for too long, the body perceives the world as less safe and more threatening. Studies that induced loneliness showed increased depression, while felt connection had the opposite effect. Longer-term studies found that loneliness often preceded depressive symptoms rather than merely following them. This makes sense if isolation acts like an alarm, signaling to a social creature that protection has thinned. The cruel twist is that lonely individuals become more vigilant, suspicious, and afraid of the very contact they need. So disconnection snowballs, turning one absence into many more through retreat, mistrust, and exhaustion. Crowds do not solve this problem, as proximity without shared meaning still leaves a person emotionally stranded. What ends loneliness is mutual care, shared purpose, and the feeling that someone is in it with you. Once belonging weakens that badly, depression and anxiety can appear as bodily adaptations to social danger. Modern life constantly teaches that status, admiration, and possessions will finally calm the restless ache inside. That lesson feels plausible because extrinsic rewards are visible, measurable, and praised from childhood onward. Yet people chasing expensive symbols and superior image consistently showed more depression and anxiety in Tim Kasser's research. Achieving intrinsic goals like love, contribution, growth, and enjoyment brought real gains in everyday well-being instead. Junk values fail because they crowd out the very needs people are actually starving for. Relationships become thinner, flow states become rarer, and self-worth gets outsourced to unstable public comparison. Advertising deepens the trap by manufacturing inadequacy and then selling products as the cure for it. The result is a life organized around display, even while the deeper self keeps asking for meaning. No purchase can meet needs for belonging, purpose, autonomy, and being valued for who you are. If these pressures feel familiar, then subscribe to the channel, because tracing them clearly helps you resist a culture that profits from confusion. Trauma in childhood can continue to shape an adult's emotional life long after the danger seems to have passed. The injury is not just the event itself, but also the survival logic a child constructs around it. Dr. Vincent Felitti discovered that many severely obese patients had used their bodies as protection after experiencing sexual abuse. This discovery led to broader evidence linking childhood trauma with significantly higher risks of depression, anxiety, and suicide. The more categories of trauma a person experienced, the worse the later emotional consequences tended to be. Children often blame themselves, as self-blame feels safer than acknowledging their total helplessness within a dangerous home. This bargain creates a terrible pattern, as control is gained in fantasy while worth is surrendered in reality. Adults then live with shame, hypervigilance, and expectations shaped by injuries they never chose. Instead of asking what is wrong with a person, the better question becomes what happened to them. Pain rooted here cannot be reasoned away by chemistry alone, as it grew inside relationships and memory. Depression flourishes where respect diminishes, nature fades, and the future seems uncertain. Both baboons and humans experience chronic stress and submission when they occupy the lower rungs of a hierarchy. Status wounds stem not just from poverty, but from being treated as inferior and overlooked. Without access to natural settings, people often lose movement, awe, and the broader perspective that diminishes a suffocating ego. Studies of greener neighbourhoods and nature walks suggest that contact with the natural world can alleviate despair. Insecurity is equally damaging, as people can better endure pain when they envision a meaningful tomorrow. Chief Plenty Coups described cultural devastation by saying that after the old world ended, nothing happened. Communities with less control over their future exhibit significantly higher suicide rates, giving that emptiness a measurable social form. When dignity, habitat, and hope erode together, depression no longer appears as a private malfunction. Instead, it begins to resemble a rational wound produced by domination, uprooting, and a future that has vanished. Genes and brain changes are significant, but they matter within a life rather than above it. Twin research indicated that inherited vulnerability is real, yet it is far from the whole story for depression or anxiety. Even the influential 5-HTT findings pointed towards sensitivity that appears only in damaging environments. Genes can load the gun of vulnerability, but experience often decides whether the trigger gets pulled. Brain changes are real too, but they can be consequences of stress, isolation, and trauma as well as pathways. That is why asking only what is inside the head gives a distorted answer. A better question asks what the head has been surrounded by, deprived of, and forced to endure. This view is not anti-science because it includes biology while restoring context that reductionism stripped away. It also changes stigma, making distress easier to see as a human reaction instead of an alien defect. When the story widens like this, responsibility shifts from lonely patients toward families, workplaces, neighbourhoods, and systems. Recovery starts when reconnection becomes practical, shared and sustained, rather than just inspirational language floating above daily life. At Coty in Berlin, neighbours fighting rent pressure became less isolated by making themselves public together. Their struggle gave them friendship, usefulness, and a sense of home larger than one apartment. At Bromley by Bow, social prescribing moved people toward gardening, groups, parties, and supported steps back into connection. Lisa regained her identity by working in the soil with others, not by sitting alone with a label. Meaningful work can also be rebuilt when people have real say, as in cooperative models that share power. Values shift through protection from mental pollution and through habits that make room for family, service, and play. Trauma heals more honestly when people are invited to speak, believed and met without judgment. None of these paths are magic, but they work on the causes rather than just numbing the alarms. When people reconnect to others, nature, purpose, and agency, hope stops sounding sentimental and starts becoming practical. Pain becomes less bewildering when it is understood as information about unmet human needs. While suffering is not noble, it becomes interpretable and more changeable. The central pattern in this journey is disconnection from work, people, values, safety, dignity, nature, and the future. Reconnection is crucial as it restores conditions for minds and bodies to settle. Some changes are personal, such as fostering mutual care or adopting more meaningful and less polluted values. Other changes are collective, like creating safer neighbourhoods, better work environments, stronger communities, and institutions that return control to people. The goal is not to romanticize suffering, but to prevent its silencing before its meaning is understood. When pain is listened to, it can guide us backward to the wound and forward to repair. Hope returns not through denial, but through understanding what must be rebuilt within and around lives. If this way of thinking resonates, subscribe to the channel for more grounded explorations of how suffering can become a map toward change.